The moment William Reynolds walked into the courtroom, his daughter Olivia let out a stifled laugh that pierced his heart like a dagger. His son-in-law, Matthew Harris, turned away, a look of undisguised contempt flashing across his face. William stood there in his weathered overalls, scuffed work boots, and clutching an old straw hat, the perfect image of a simple country farmer who had no business being in a place where important decisions were made. The eyes of the courtroom fell upon him, pitying, dismissive glances that seemed to ask what this confused old man was doing here. William felt each stare but kept his gaze steady. 70 years of life had taught him patience, taught him to wait for the right moment. And today, that patience would finally pay off in ways no one in this room could possibly imagine. Olivia leaned over to whisper something in Matthew's ear. The younger man's mouth curled into a smug smile. William caught fragments of their exchange, shouldn't have bothered to show up, and just making it harder on himself. They believed they had already won. Their confidence was so absolute it bordered on arrogance, and that would be their undoing. The courtroom buzzed with the low murmur of conversations, lawyers shuffling papers, court officials moving about with practiced efficiency. To them, this was just another case, another family dispute over money and property. They'd seen it all before: ungrateful children trying to wrest control from aging parents, deemed no longer capable of managing their affairs. A sad but common story playing out with depressing regularity in America's courtrooms. William adjusted his posture deliberately, stooping a little more, playing into their perception of him. Let them see what they expected to see for now. The carefully cultivated image of a declining old man had served him well these past months. Today it would serve its final purpose. 3 months earlier, William had received the call that changed everything. The sound of Olivia's voice had been strangely controlled, unnaturally calm, as she delivered the news that had shattered his world. Uncle Benjamin passed away last night. We need to discuss his estate. There are legal matters to address. Not a single question about how he felt, not a moment of shared grief for the man who had been more than a brother to William. He had been his other half, his best friend, his confidant since childhood. The pain of that moment resurged now as William stood in the courtroom. Benjamin gone forever, and William hadn't even been there to say goodbye. His older brother, the one who had taught him to be strong after their father died, who had worked 2 jobs to put William through law school, who had believed in him when no one else did, now reduced to legal matters, in his daughter's cold estimation. William had driven the 4 hours to Atlanta the day after that call, his heart heavy with grief and a growing sense of unease. Something in Olivia's tone had troubled him, but he had been too overwhelmed by loss to fully register the warning signs. He arrived at the sprawling Tudor-style house where Olivia and Matthew lived, a house so large and ostentatious that William had never understood why 2 people needed so much space. It was Matthew who opened the door, not even greeting William with a handshake, much less the hug one might expect for a father-in-law who had just lost his only brother. Matthew simply nodded curtly and stepped aside, as if William were a delivery person rather than family. The living room had been transformed into what looked like a makeshift office with papers spread across the glass coffee table. Olivia rose when he entered, offering a quick, perfunctory hug that felt like embracing a stranger. "Sit down, Ba," she directed, gesturing toward the sofa with a manicured hand. "We have important things to discuss." Matthew positioned himself behind her arms, crossed over his chest, watching William with the calculating gaze of someone assessing a problem rather than comforting a grieving family member. Olivia began speaking immediately about Benjamin's inheritance property on Atlanta's outskirts, valued at over $800,000 plus investments in bank accounts. William barely registered the number, still struggling to accept that Benjamin was truly gone. "Benjamin left everything to you," Olivia said, her voice tinged not with happiness for her father, but with something that sounded remarkably like annoyance. "But Ba, you live alone in the country. You don't need all that. You don't know how to handle that kind of wealth. You could lose everything." Matthew stepped forward, then his voice taking on the authoritative tone he always used when speaking to William. "Mr. Reynolds," he said deliberately, not using Ba or even father-in-law, as if to distance himself from any familial obligation. "The sensible thing would be for you to let us handle this. Olivia is an attorney. I have extensive business experience. We can ensure everything is managed properly." William looked at them both, these strangers wearing the faces of family, and felt something shift inside him. A silent alarm beginning to sound. Managed or kept? The words left his mouth before he could stop them. Olivia's expression hardened instantly. Don't be ridiculous, Ba. We're trying to help you. You don't understand these things. You've been living like a hermit for years. The world has changed and you've stayed behind. Her words cut deeper than she could possibly know precisely because there was a grain of truth in them. After his wife Marie died 5 years ago, William had indeed withdrawn from the world. The sprawling house in Atlanta's exclusive Buckhead neighborhood had become unbearable without her laughter filling its rooms. He had sold it and moved to a simple farmhouse in rural Georgia, seeking peace away from the noise and pretense of the city. But that didn't mean he had forgotten who he was, for that quiet life began. It didn't mean he had forgotten 3 decades of legal practice or lost his mind along with his heart. I need time to think, William told him, his voice quiet but firm. I'm not signing anything today. Olivia and Matthew exchanged a look, a glance so brief yet so laden with meaning that William felt a chill run through him. All right, Ba, Olivia conceded with a forced smile that didn't reach her eyes. Take your time, but not too much. There are legal deadlines to meet. That night, William slept in their guest room, though slept was perhaps too generous a term. He lay awake in the darkness, surrounded by expensive furnishings that felt cold and impersonal, so different from the warm, lived-in comfort of his farmhouse. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. The instinct that had served him so well during his years as an attorney whispered warnings he couldn't ignore. These people, his own flesh and blood, were not to be trusted. Dawn had barely broken when voices drifted up from downstairs. William rose quietly and moved to the hallway, his bare feet silent on the plush carpet. He descended the stairs slowly, careful to avoid the third step that he remembered always creaked. Olivia and Matthew were in the kitchen, speaking in hushed tones, but not hushed enough. He's a stubborn old man, Matthew was saying, frustration evident in every syllable. If he won't sign willingly, we'll have to do it the hard way. I know, Olivia replied, her voice so cold and detached that William barely recognized it as belonging to the little girl who had once climbed into his lap for bedtime stories. That's why I hired the lawyer. We're going to have him declared incompetent. William froze on the stairs, his hand gripping the banister so tightly his knuckles whitened. The blow was physical, a punch to the stomach that left him struggling for breath. With his age and the fact that he lives alone, isolated from everyone, it will be easy to convince a judge he's not fit to handle an inheritance like this. Olivia continued, her voice taking on the clinical precision William recognized from her courtroom presentations. And once we have control, Matthew asked, we sell everything, put the money somewhere safe. He'll be fine in that state facility I looked into. It's basic but adequate and most importantly affordable. That leaves us with the bulk of the money intact. William stood there in the shadows of the staircase, listening as his daughter and her husband calmly plotted his destruction as if he were an inconvenient obstacle rather than a human being, let alone her father. His mind raced through memories of Olivia as a child, her gap-toothed smile when he taught her to ride a bike, her fierce determination as he helped her prepare for her first mock trial in high school, her radiant joy when he walked her down the aisle 6 years ago. Where had that girl gone? When had she transformed into this cold, calculating stranger? The answer came to him as he thought about Matthew, the ambitious investment banker, who had swept into Olivia's life and gradually isolated her from her parents. William had noticed the changes slowly over the years, how Olivia's visits became less frequent, how she began to echo Matthew's opinions and priorities, how the warm, compassionate young woman she had been seemed to recede behind a facade of sophistication and material success. William retreated silently back to the guest room, packed his small overnight bag, and left before either of them realized he was gone. He didn't leave a note, he didn't say goodbye. There was nothing to say to people who had already decided he was disposable. The drive back to his farmhouse took 4 hours, his hands clenched on the steering wheel as rage and pain battled for supremacy in his chest. How dare they? How dare they presume to decide his fate as if he were already dead? By the time he turned onto the gravel driveway leading to his modest home, a plan was already forming in his mind. If they wanted a fight, they would get one, but not the kind they were expecting. William sat on his porch that evening with a cup of coffee, watching the sun set behind the distant mountains. The peaceful setting contrasted sharply with the turmoil inside him. As darkness fell, memories flooded back not just of Olivia and Benjamin, but of who William Reynolds had been before he became this supposedly confused old man living among chickens and tomato plants. William and Benjamin had grown up in a humble family in rural Georgia. Their father died when William was just 12, leaving Benjamin barely 18 to become the man of the house. Benjamin had postponed his own dreams to support his mother and younger brother, working construction during the day and as a janitor at night. When William showed academic promise, it was Benjamin who insisted he apply to college. Benjamin who scraped together the money for applications. Benjamin who drove him to Atlanta for interviews. William had graduated with honors and gone on to law school again with Benjamin's unwavering support. "You're going to be something great," Benjamin had told him. "You're going to help people who need it." And for 35 years, that's exactly what William had done. He built a reputation as a formidable real estate attorney who often took cases pro bono for families facing foreclosure or predatory lending. During the financial crisis of 2008, when countless Americans were losing their homes, William had become something of a local legend in Atlanta for his tireless advocacy. The press had dubbed him the People's Champion, though he had always shrugged off the title, uncomfortable with the attention. All those years, Benjamin had watched his brother's success with pride, never once expressing envy that his own sacrifice had made it possible. Instead, he had built a respectable life for himself, eventually becoming a construction foreman and saving every penny to buy the property that was now at the center of this dispute. "It's my retirement plan," he would joke to William, "but it's really for both of us. Brothers stick together until the end." William's reverie was interrupted by the ringing of his phone. He checked the caller ID, Sarah Wilson. His heart lightened slightly. If there was one person in the world he could trust right now, it was Sarah. Sarah had been William's legal secretary for 28 years before his retirement. More than an employee, she had become a friend, confidant, and eventually, after Marie's death, his most consistent connection to his former life. Sarah was the only person who knew where to find him, the only one he had trusted with his new address and phone number when he moved to the countryside. William picked up the call, Sarah's familiar voice immediately bringing comfort. "William, I've been trying to reach you for days. Are you all right? I heard about Benjamin, and I've been so worried." William's throat tightened with emotion at the genuine concern in her voice, such a stark contrast to Olivia's clinical detachment. "I'm managing," he answered, simply then paused before adding, "But I need your help, Sarah. It's important." He told her everything: Benjamin's death, the inheritance, Olivia and Matthew's plans. Sarah listened without interruption, though William could hear her sharp intake of breath when he described overhearing their scheme to have him declared incompetent. "Those ungrateful, conniving—" Sarah's voice shook with indignation. "William, you can't let them get away with this." "I don't intend to," he replied, his voice taking on a steeliness that had once made opposing counsel nervous in courtrooms across Georgia. "But I need information. Matthew mentioned they've already hired an attorney. I need to know who." Sarah's response was immediate and unhesitating. "Consider it done. I still have contacts all over the Atlanta legal community. I'll find out everything I can." As William hung up, he felt a familiar sensation stirring within him, the methodical, strategic thinking that had once been second nature. Olivia and Matthew believed they were dealing with a confused old farmer. They had no idea they were up against one of the most respected legal minds in the state's recent history. Their mistake would be their undoing. Sarah called back the next morning with information that confirmed William's suspicions. "They've hired Jennifer Miller," she reported. "She specializes in elder law and guardianship cases. She's built her reputation on having elderly people declared incompetent. And William, she's good. She wins almost every case she takes on." William nodded to himself. He had crossed paths with Jennifer Miller early in her career. She had been sharp, but ethically flexible even then. "What else have you found out?" "The petition has already been filed. The hearing is scheduled for 3 weeks from today. They're moving fast, William." "Then so will I," he replied. "Sarah, I need one more favor. Is Judge James Parker still on the bench?" There was a pause on the line. "Yes, he's still active. Family Court Division now." "Why do you ask?" "I need to see him, privately before the hearing." "William," Sarah's voice took on a cautious tone. "That's irregular at best, potentially unethical at worst. I'm not going to discuss the case with him. I just need to remind him of something." Another pause, longer this time. "All right, I'll see what I can arrange. But William, be careful. If you're thinking what I think you're thinking, trust me, Sarah, sometimes the best strategy is the one no one sees coming." 2 days later, when William found himself sitting in the waiting room outside Judge James Parker's chambers, dressed in the same simple work clothes he wore every day on his farm. The secretary had given him a curious look when he stated his business, clearly wondering what this elderly farmer could possibly want with a superior court judge. William waited patiently. hands folded over his worn hat, eyes fixed on the door. When it finally opened and Judge Parker emerged, William had to suppress a smile at how little the man had changed. A little grayer at the temples, perhaps a few more lines around the eyes, but still the same earnest expression, the same purposeful stride. "Mr. Reynolds, is it?" Judge Parker asked, consulting the note his secretary had given him. "I'm afraid I can only give you a few minutes. Court is back in session at 2. William stood slowly, deliberately maintaining his stooped posture. "Thank you for seeing me, Your Honor. I won't take much of your time." The judge ushered him into his chambers, a spacious room lined with law books and framed certificates. "What can I help you with today, Mr. Reynolds?" William settled into the chair across from the judge's desk, taking his time appearing to gather his thoughts. "Your Honor, do you remember the Morales case 2002, I believe it was? Family of 6 facing eviction after the father was injured on the job. Predatory lender trying to seize their home." Judge Parker's brow furrowed in confusion. "The Morales case? Yes, of course, but how would you—" His voice trailed off as he studied William more carefully, a flicker of recognition beginning to dawn in his eyes. William straightened his posture, squared his shoulders, and looked directly into the judge's eyes with the intense focus that had once been his courtroom trademark. The lender's attorney argued that Mr. Morales had signed away his rights to contest the foreclosure. "You were just a first-year associate, then fresh out of law school handling your first pro bono case under my supervision. Do you remember what I told you that day?" Judge Parker's face had drained of color. He gripped the edge of his desk as if to steady himself. "My God," he whispered. "William Reynolds, it's really you." William nodded, allowing a small smile. "In the flesh, though, somewhat worse for wear these days. But you disappeared after your wife died. The firm said you'd retired, but no one knew where you'd gone. There were rumors, but—" The judge shook his head in disbelief. "What happened to you?" "I needed peace, James, a simpler life away from everything that reminded me of what I'd lost." Judge Parker leaned forward, still processing the revelation. "And you've been living as, what, a farmer all this time? Not playing at being a farmer, actually being one. Growing my own food, raising chickens, reading books instead of legal briefs. It's been healing." The judge stood, suddenly moving around the desk. "William, do you have any idea what your work meant to people? The Morales case was just the beginning. The foreclosure clinic you established during the financial crisis saved hundreds of homes. Law students still study your strategies. You're practically a legend." William waved a dismissive hand. "I was just doing my job. But James, I didn't come here to reminisce. I'm here because I need your help, or rather, I need your impartiality in a matter that's coming before your court." Judge Parker's expression shifted from amazement to concern. "What matter?" "My daughter and her husband have filed a petition to have me declared incompetent. They want control of property my brother left me when he died." "Your daughter?" The judge's incredulity was evident. "But surely once she realizes who you are, what you're capable of—" "That's just it," William interrupted. "I don't want her to know. Not yet." Understanding dawned slowly on the judge's face. "You want to appear before me as—" He gestured to William's farmer's clothes and weathered appearance. William nodded. "Exactly as I am now, as the man they believe me to be." "But why you could end this immediately? One phone call to any number of attorneys in this city who would represent you, who would testify to your mental acuity and legal brilliance." "Because I need to know why," William said, his voice suddenly heavy with the weight of parental disappointment. "I need to understand how my own daughter could do this. And I need her to realize what she's done not just to me, but to herself, to the person I raised her to be." Judge Parker studied him for a long moment. "I can't discuss a case that will be coming before me. That would be highly inappropriate. I'm not asking you to. I'm only asking that you allow the case to proceed normally. Don't recuse yourself because you know me. Let me handle this my way." The judge returned to his chair, a troubled expression on his face. "William, what you're suggesting borders on deception of the court." William shook his head. "I won't lie under oath. I won't claim to be anyone other than who I am. I'll simply be selective about which parts of myself I reveal and when I reveal them." This is unorthodox, to say the least. So was teaching a first-year associate to argue that unconscionability could void a foreclosure contract despite clear language to the contrary. William countered, referring to the strategy that had won the Morales case all those years ago. "Sometimes justice requires creativity." Judge Parker couldn't suppress a small smile at the memory. You always did have a unique approach to the law. He sighed, then nodded slowly. I can't and won't make any promises about how I'll rule, and the case will be decided strictly on its merits. That's all I'm asking for. As William stood to leave, the judge rose as well, extending his hand. It's good to see you again, William, despite the circumstances. William shook his hand firmly. Likewise, James, or should I say Your Honor. The judge chuckled, then grew serious again. Whatever happens in my courtroom, William, you should know that your work made a difference. Your legacy in this city is secure. William's throat tightened unexpectedly. Thank you. That means more than you know. As he left the courthouse and walked back to his truck, William felt a renewed sense of purpose. The pieces were falling into place. Now he needed to prepare for the performance of his life, a performance where, ironically, he would initially pretend to be exactly who everyone already thought he was. Back at his farmhouse, William and Sarah spent the next 2 weeks gathering evidence and preparing his defense. Sarah's network of contacts proved invaluable, providing information that painted a troubling picture of Matthew's financial situation. Despite the outward appearance of success, he had made several failed investments and was carrying substantial debt. The timing of the petition coincided suspiciously with a margin call on one of his trading accounts. Even more disturbing were the emails Sarah uncovered between Matthew and a woman named Amanda, dating back to when Emily was undergoing chemotherapy. While Olivia had been at the hospital with her mother, Matthew had been planning rendezvous with his mistress. She doesn't know, does she? William asked Sarah as they reviewed the evidence. Olivia has no idea he's been unfaithful. Sarah shook her head. From what I can gather, no. He's been very careful. William felt a fresh wave of anger, not just at Matthew's betrayal of his daughter, but at the man's breathtaking hypocrisy in questioning anyone else's competence while demonstrating such appalling judgment in his own life. The day before the hearing, Sarah brought one final piece of evidence: emails between Olivia and the administrator of a state-funded care facility on the outskirts of Atlanta. They've already begun the placement process, Sarah said grimly. They're planning to move you there within days of gaining guardianship. William examined the facility's information. It was technically not the worst place. It met minimum state requirements, but it was understaffed, institutional, and devoid of the dignity and autonomy he valued in his current life. The thought of being confined there made his skin crawl. It won't come to that, he said firmly, though his heart ached at this final confirmation of Olivia's betrayal. What had happened to his compassionate, principled daughter? When had money become more important to her than family? The morning of the hearing arrived clear and crisp. William, dressed in his most worn overalls and work shirt, deliberately choosing clothes that would reinforce the image Olivia and Matthew had of him. Sarah had offered to drive him to the courthouse, but he had declined. He needed these final moments alone to center himself, to remember exactly who he was and what he was fighting for. As he drove toward Atlanta, William thought about Benjamin. What would his brother say if he could see what was happening? The property had been Benjamin's pride and joy, his life's work and savings combined into one legacy he had explicitly wanted William to have. You'll know what to do with it, Benjamin had told him during their last phone conversation a week before his sudden heart attack. You always did know how to make things right. Making things right. That had been the driving force of William's legal career. Not the money or the prestige, but the fundamental belief that the law properly applied could correct injustices and protect the vulnerable. Today, ironically, he would be protecting himself. The courtroom was already half full when William arrived. He spotted Olivia and Matthew immediately seated beside a sleek, polished woman he recognized as Jennifer Miller. They were the picture of professional success: Olivia in an expensive suit, her hair perfectly styled. Matthew looking every inch the successful businessman in tailored clothes that probably cost more than William spent on groceries in 6 months. William took his seat alone at the defendant's table. Jennifer Miller had argued successfully that he didn't need counsel, that appointing an attorney would only waste resources that could be better used for his care once the guardianship was established. It was a tactical move designed to put him at a disadvantage, but today it would backfire spectacularly. The courtroom fell silent as Judge Parker entered. William noticed the momentary flicker in the judge's eyes as he saw William seated at the defendant's table, but to his credit, Parker's professional demeanor never wavered. Case number 2025 CV 4872, in re guardianship of William Reynolds, the clerk announced. Petitioners Olivia Harris and Matthew Harris versus respondent William Reynolds. Jennifer Miller rose smoothly, all confident smiles and practiced gestures. Your Honor, We are here today seeking guardianship for William Reynolds, age 70, who is no longer capable of managing his affairs or caring for himself adequately. She launched into a carefully crafted narrative about William's deteriorating condition since his wife's death, how he had abandoned his successful career and social connections to live in isolation, how he had rejected modern conveniences in favor of a primitive existence that put his health and safety at risk. Mr. Reynolds lives in a small farmhouse with inadequate heating and cooling, grows his own food rather than ensuring proper nutrition through reliable sources, and has not seen a doctor in over 3 years despite his advanced age. Miller continued, he has withdrawn from family and friends, exhibiting classic signs of depression and cognitive decline. William listened calmly, noting how skillfully she wove together facts and implications, truths and distortions. Yes, his farmhouse was small, but it was well-maintained and perfectly comfortable. Yes, he grew much of his own food, but that was a choice based on preference and values, not confusion or inability. And yes, he had limited his social circle drastically, but that too had been deliberate, a decision to focus on quality of relationships rather than quantity. Miller called Olivia to the stand first. William watched his daughter raise her right hand and swear to tell the truth, wondering if she even recognized the irony of the moment. Ms. Harris, when did you first notice changes in your father's behavior? Miller asked. Olivia assumed an expression of pained concern that William might have found convincing had he not overheard her true feelings. After my mother died, he seemed to just give up. He sold their beautiful home and moved to this rundown farm in the middle of nowhere. He got rid of his cell phone, canceled his email account. It became harder and harder to reach him. And his living conditions now, they're primitive, Olivia said, echoing Miller's earlier description. The house is barely insulated. He refuses to use air conditioning in summer or proper heating in winter. He's living like it's the 1950s. And his financial management, non-existent. He keeps cash in the house rather than using a bank. He has no investment strategy, no financial advisor. Now with my uncle's estate, she shook her head sorrowfully. He simply doesn't have the capacity to manage that level of assets. Miller nodded sympathetically. Thank you, Ms. Harris. No further questions. William declined to cross-examine his daughter. Let her believe her testimony stood unchallenged for now. Matthew's testimony followed a similar pattern, concerned expressions, carefully crafted half-truths, and outright fabrications about William's mental state. He often seems confused during our conversations, Matthew claimed. He'll repeat himself or forget what we were discussing. When we visited last Christmas, he left the stove on all night, a serious fire hazard. William almost smiled at that particular lie. He hadn't spent Christmas with them in 3 years, and his stove was electric, not gas. These were the kinds of details that would unravel their case once challenged. After Matthew stepped down, Miller called her expert witness, a psychologist who had never met William, but who testified about the warning signs of dementia and diminished capacity based on the reported behaviors. It was textbook circular reasoning if you accepted the premise that William's lifestyle choices were symptoms rather than preferences. Then of course they indicated decline. Finally, Miller concluded her case with a dramatic flourish. Your Honor, the evidence clearly demonstrates that William Reynolds is no longer capable of making sound decisions regarding his person or property. We ask the court to appoint his daughter, Olivia Harris, as guardian with full authority to manage his affairs and ensure he receives the care he so desperately needs. Judge Parker turned to William. Mr. Reynolds, do you wish to present a defense? William rose slowly, maintaining his rural farmer persona for one final moment. Yes, Your Honor, I would. He walked to the podium with measured steps, still stooped, still playing the role of the confused elder. He could feel Olivia and Matthew's dismissive glances, could practically hear their thoughts. What could this old man possibly say that would matter? Your Honor, William began, his voice initially soft and uncertain, exactly as they expected. I've listened to a lot of things being said about me today. About my home, my choices, my mind. He paused, letting the moment stretch. And I have just one question to ask. Judge Parker nodded. Go ahead, Mr. Reynolds. William turned to face Jennifer Miller directly. Counselor, are you familiar with the precedent established in Cruzen versus Director, Missouri Department of Health regarding an individual's right to refuse treatment? The courtroom went absolutely silent. Miller's confident expression faltered. Well, yes, of course, but William didn't wait for her to recover. And would you say that Planned Parenthood versus Casey further extended the concept of personal autonomy in medical decision-making, Or would you align more with Justice Scalia's dissent in that case? Miller's mouth opened and closed like a fish suddenly finding itself on land. Before she could formulate a response, William turned back to the judge, straightening his posture and speaking in the clear, authoritative voice that had once commanded courtrooms throughout Georgia. Furthermore, Your Honor, I would direct the court's attention to Olmstead v. L.C., where the Supreme Court held that unjustified segregation of persons with disabilities constitutes discrimination. Even if I were suffering from cognitive decline, which I am not, the petitioner's plan to place me in institutional care would potentially violate the integration mandate of the Americans with Disabilities Act. A collective gasp rippled through the courtroom. Olivia had gone pale, her eyes wide with shock. Matthew was frantically whispering to Miller, who looked as if she'd been struck. William continued, his voice gaining strength and conviction with each word. Your Honor, what we have here is not a case about mental competence. It is a case about control, about greed, and about fundamental misunderstandings of what constitutes quality of life and personal autonomy. He turned to face the gallery, his eyes meeting Olivia's directly for the first time. I chose to leave my legal career after losing my wife. I chose to live simply to grow my own food, to disconnect from the constant noise and distraction of modern life. These were not signs of decline. They were deliberate decisions made by a man seeking peace after loss. Addressing the court again, William spoke with the measured precision that had once been his professional hallmark. I will demonstrate today not only that I am fully competent to manage my affairs, but that this entire proceeding is a thinly veiled attempt to seize control of property that rightfully belongs to me, property that my brother explicitly intended for me to have. Judge Parker, playing his role perfectly, affected surprised confusion. Mr. Reynolds, you seem remarkably well-versed in legal matters for someone with your background. William allowed himself a small smile. Yes, Your Honor. 35 years as a practicing attorney tends to have that effect. The courtroom erupted in murmurs and exclamations. Judge Parker gavelled for order. Silence in the court. Mr. Reynolds, are you stating that you were an attorney? I am stating, Your Honor, that I was, and technically still am, as my bar membership remains active. A real estate attorney with the firm of Donaldson, Reynolds, and Mitchell from 1989 until my retirement in 2020. I specialized in foreclosure defense and property rights. Judge Parker feigned surprise masterfully. This is an unexpected development. Ms. Miller, were you aware of this? Jennifer Miller had somewhat recovered her composure, though she still looked shaken. Your Honor, this is clearly a desperate attempt by the respondent to avoid guardianship. There's no evidence to support. Actually, William interrupted, there is considerable evidence. He turned to the back of the courtroom where Sarah had just slipped in. Your Honor, I call Sarah Wilson as a witness. What followed was a systematic dismantling of everything Olivia and Matthew had claimed. Sarah testified about William's distinguished legal career, his mental sharpness, and his deliberate choice to live more simply after Marie's death. She presented documentation of his continued legal reading and research, his careful financial management, and most damagingly, the emails revealing Matthew and Olivia's true plans. As the evidence mounted, William watched his daughter's face transition from shock to disbelief to growing horror, as she realized not only that she had catastrophically misjudged her father, but that her husband's infidelity and financial troubles were now being exposed in open court. By the time William concluded his defense, there was no question of the outcome. Judge Parker, after making a show of carefully considering all evidence, ruled firmly in William's favor, dismissing the guardianship petition and affirming his right to manage his own affairs and property. Furthermore, the judge added, given the evidence of potential financial exploitation attempted here, I am ordering a 90-day protective order preventing either petitioner from accessing or attempting to access Mr. Reynolds' property or accounts in any way. As the courtroom began to clear, William gathered his papers calmly. Olivia approached his table, her face streaked with tears, Matthew conspicuously absent. He had stormed out immediately after the ruling. Bah, she whispered, using the Vietnamese term of endearment for father that she had used since childhood, a linguistic vestige of Marie's heritage. I don't understand. Why didn't you tell me? Why did you let me believe? William looked at his daughter, seeing both the confused child she had once been and the misguided woman she had become. Would you have believed me if I had told you? Or would you and Matthew have seen it as further evidence of delusion, an old man claiming a distinguished past that never existed? Olivia had no answer for that, the truth of his words evident in her silence. When you decide what kind of person you want to be, Olivia, When you remember who you were raised to be, you know where to find me." William collected his old straw hat and walked out of the courtroom, his back straight, his steps sure. Phase 1 of his plan was complete. Benjamin's property was secure. Now came the harder part, deciding what to do with it and whether the daughter who had betrayed him could ever find a place in his life again. The morning after the hearing, William sat at his kitchen table drinking coffee from the chipped blue mug Marie had bought him for their 20th anniversary. Sunlight streamed through the windows, catching dust motes that danced in the air like tiny celebrants marking his victory. The house felt different today, not just a refuge from the world, but a statement of choice of agency reclaimed. Sarah arrived promptly at 9, carrying a box of pastries from the bakery in town and a thick folder of documents. Her face glowed with vindication as she recounted reactions from the legal community already buzzing about William's courtroom revelation. Jennifer Miller isn't showing her face anywhere today. Word is she's furious about being blindsided. She's telling anyone who'll listen that she was set up. William sipped his coffee, feeling neither triumph nor satisfaction, only a profound weariness. Victory in court meant little when weighed against the knowledge that his own daughter had been willing to lock him away for financial gain. The property was secure, but the deeper loss remained the betrayal of trust, of values, of everything he had tried to teach Olivia. Sarah sensed his mood, setting aside her celebratory tone. "Have you heard from her?" William shook his head. "And I don't expect to, not yet. She needs time to process everything." "So do I." Sarah opened the folder, shifting to practical matters. "I've compiled all the information on Benjamin's property. 8 acres on the outskirts of Atlanta, including the main house he lived in, and 2 smaller cottages he was renting out. The location is prime, close enough to the city for convenience, but far enough out to maintain some privacy. Developers have been eyeing that whole area for years." William examined the property survey, his finger tracing the boundaries of the land his brother had lovingly maintained for decades. Benjamin had purchased the property piece by piece over 30 years, starting with just the main house and gradually acquiring adjacent lots as they became available. It wasn't just real estate to him. It was a vision, a legacy. "What about the rental agreements for the cottages?" William asked. "Both tenants are elderly women who've been there for years. Benjamin kept their rent well below market value. According to his notes, Mrs. Chen in the East Cottage has been there for 14 years, Mrs. Sullivan in the West Cottage for 9. Both expressed concern about what would happen after his death." William nodded, unsurprised. That was Benjamin, always looking out for others, always considering the human impact of business decisions. "They don't need to worry. We'll honor their arrangements." As they worked through the documents, a clearer picture emerged of exactly why Matthew had been so eager to get his hands on the property. A developer called Meridian Partners had been making increasingly aggressive offers to buy the entire parcel, their most recent offer reaching $1.2 million, considerably more than the $800,000 valuation that had been mentioned in court. "That explains a lot," William murmured, studying the letters from Meridian's acquisition team. At that price, no wonder Matthew was desperate. Sarah pulled out another document, her expression hardening. "There's more. I did some digging into Matthew's financial situation. He didn't just make a few bad investments. He's underwater on margin calls from his brokerage. He's been using Olivia's trust fund to cover his trading losses without her knowledge." The revelation hit William like a physical blow. Marie's parents had established that trust fund when Olivia was born, adding to it every year until their deaths. It represented not just money, but family love, hopes for Olivia's future. To think of Matthew secretly draining it for his reckless stock trading. "Does she know?" William asked, his voice tight with controlled anger. "After yesterday's court revelations, I'd imagine she's beginning to put the pieces together." William fell silent, staring out the kitchen window at the vegetative garden he'd planted that spring. The neat rows of tomatoes, peppers, and beans represented everything he valued. Now simplicity, self-sufficiency, honest labor that produced tangible results. How different from the world of high finance Matthew inhabited, where numbers on screens were manipulated to create wealth from nothing, until suddenly, as in Matthew's case, that illusory wealth vanished just as magically as it had appeared. "I need to see the property," William decided. "Not just look at papers, but walk the grounds, see what Benjamin valued about it. Will you come with me?" Sarah agreed, and they planned to drive to Atlanta the following day. As she was leaving, Sarah hesitated at the door. "William, I've been thinking about Benjamin's property and what he would have wanted you to do with it." William raised an eyebrow questioningly. "Do you remember that pro bono legal clinic you started during the financial crisis? The one that helped all those families facing foreclosure. William nodded. The clinic had been one of his proudest achievements, a collaborative effort that brought together attorneys, financial counselors, and housing advocates to help families navigate the complex legal landscape of foreclosure defense. The funding for that kind of work is even scarcer now, Sarah continued. Most of the organizations that were doing similar work have shut down or scaled back dramatically, but the need is still there, maybe even greater. The seed of an idea took root in William's mind, growing stronger as he spent the evening reflecting on Benjamin's life and legacy. By morning, it had blossomed into a clear vision, one that honored both his brother's memory and the values they had shared. The drive to Atlanta felt like traveling backward in time. As the rural landscape gave way to suburbs, and then the dense urban sprawl of the city, William found himself remembering the countless commutes he'd made during his legal career, the steady progression from eager young associate to respected senior partner. He had loved the intellectual challenge of the law, the structured ritual of courtroom procedure, the satisfaction of helping clients navigate complex problems. But he didn't miss the constant pressure, the emotional toll of absorbing others' crises day after day, or the politics of law firm management. Benjamin's property lay in a pocket of semi-rural tranquility that had somehow survived the city's relentless expansion. As they turned onto the long gravel driveway, William caught his first glimpse of the main house, a rambling two-story craftsman with a deep front porch and dormered windows. It was quintessentially Benjamin, unpretentious, yet dignified, practical, yet beautiful in its simplicity. He kept it in perfect condition, Sarah remarked, taking in the freshly painted exterior and meticulously maintained gardens. The interior told the same story of careful stewardship. Every room showed Benjamin's attention to detail, original woodwork, lovingly preserved modern conveniences, thoughtfully integrated without disrupting the home's historic character. William moved from room to room, absorbing the essence of his brother through the space he had created, feeling Benjamin's presence in every carefully chosen furnishing and family photograph. In the study, William found Benjamin's desk with its neat stacks of paperwork, bills, correspondence, property, maintenance records. Everything was organized with characteristic precision. Pinned to the bulletin board above the desk was a newspaper clipping about a local family who had lost their home in a predatory lending scheme. William recognized his own name in the article. He had represented the family pro bono and helped them recover their property. "He was proud of you," Sarah said softly, noticing the clipping. "He kept track of all your cases, you know. He had a whole file of news stories about your work." William's throat tightened with emotion. Even as he had been making his mark in the legal world, Benjamin had been quietly supporting him from the sidelines, taking pride in his younger brother's achievements, without ever seeking recognition for the sacrifices that had made those achievements possible. After touring the main house, they walked the grounds, visiting the two rental cottages. Both were charming, smaller versions of the main house, each with its own garden space. Mrs. Chen, a retired school teacher, greeted them warmly, clearly relieved to learn that her housing situation remained secure. Mrs. Sullivan, a widow in her late 70s, invited them in for tea and shared stories about Benjamin's kindness over the years, how he had never raised the rent even as property values in the area skyrocketed, how he had installed safety features in her bathroom after she'd had a minor fall. "He was a gentleman of the old school," Mrs. Sullivan said, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "They don't make many like him anymore." By the time they completed their tour of the property, William's vision for its future had solidified. He and Sarah sat at the kitchen table in the main house, the afternoon sun casting long shadows across the worn wooden surface. "I know what I want to do with this place," William announced. "Benjamin preserved this property as an island of affordability and dignity in an area increasingly dominated by luxury developments. I want to continue that legacy but expand it. I'm going to establish the Benjamin Reynolds Center for Housing Justice, a combination legal clinic and community resource center that will provide free legal services to people facing housing insecurity." Sarah's face lit up with enthusiasm. "William, that's perfect. The main house could serve as the clinic space with offices for attorneys and meeting rooms for clients. And the grounds are beautiful, a peaceful place for people dealing with the stress of potential homelessness. And we'll maintain the cottages as affordable rentals for seniors," William added. "Maybe even add more small housing units, eventually creating a model for how affordable housing can be integrated into communities without sacrificing quality or dignity." They spent the rest of the afternoon drafting plans. William's legal expertise, combining with his newfound appreciation for practical, sustainable living, gained during his years on the farm. By evening, they had the outline of a viable project, one that would require work and investment, but that could make a real difference in people's lives. As they prepared to leave, William stood on the front porch, looking out over the property that now represented not just his brother's legacy, but a new purpose for his own life. "This is how I honor him," he said quietly, "not by preserving this place as a monument, but by making it a living embodiment of what he valued: community, dignity, security." Sarah squeezed his arm gently. "He would be so proud, William. So would Marie." The mention of his late wife's name brought a bittersweet pang. Marie had always been his moral compass, the one who reminded him why the work mattered beyond the intellectual satisfaction of legal victories. She would have loved this project, would have thrown herself into making it a reality with the same passionate commitment she had brought to everything in her life. Their return to Atlanta caught the attention of William's former colleagues in the legal community. Word spread quickly about his reemergence and his plans for the Benjamin Reynolds Center. Within days, offers of support began pouring in: attorneys volunteering pro bono hours, law students eager for practical experience, donors interested in supporting the mission. Preston Wallace, now managing partner at Williams' former firm, invited him to lunch at the downtown club, where they had once regularly discussed cases and strategy. The wood-paneled dining room with its hushed conversations and attentive servers felt like a relic from another life, though it had only been 5 years since William had last been there. Preston had aged noticeably, the pressures of firm management etched into the deep lines around his eyes and mouth. "You're looking well, William," he observed, taking in his former colleague's healthy tan and relaxed demeanor. "Country living clearly agrees with you." William nodded, accepting the compliment without elaboration. "I understand congratulations are in order for you, senior managing partner now. For all the glory and headaches that entails," Preston confirmed with a rueful smile. "Frankly, there are days I envy your escape, but that's not why I wanted to see you. This center you're establishing, it's exactly the kind of project our firm's foundation has been looking to support. I'd like to propose a partnership. We can provide significant funding, office equipment, legal resources, and our associates can staff the clinic on a rotating basis as part of their pro bono requirements." The offer was generous and would solve many of the practical challenges of getting the center operational quickly. But William had learned caution the hard way. "What would your firm expect in return?" Preston spread his hands disarmingly. "Naming rights to one of the consultation rooms. Perhaps occasional media mentions. Nothing that would compromise the center's mission or independence." William considered the proposal. Preston's firm had a solid reputation for ethical practice, and their foundation had funded several worthy initiatives over the years. Still, he was reluctant to tie the center too closely to any single institutional partner. "I appreciate the offer, Preston. Let's structure it as an annual grant rather than a permanent partnership. That gives both sides flexibility as the center evolves, and it keeps us accountable to the mission rather than to funders." Preston nodded, accepting the counter-proposal without argument. "Always the careful negotiator, William. Some things never change." He raised his glass in a toast to the Benjamin Reynolds Center and to second acts. As they parted after lunch, Preston mentioned casually, "I ran into your daughter last week at the courthouse. She seemed different, more like the serious young attorney I remember from her early career, less like—" He trailed off diplomatically. "Less like the society wife she became after marrying Matthew." William finished the thought. "What was she doing at the courthouse?" "Filing divorce papers, from what I gathered. I didn't pry, but she mentioned she was looking for a new position. Her firm specializes in corporate law, but she expressed interest in moving into public interest work." Preston studied William's face. "She didn't tell you?" William kept his expression neutral. "Olivia and I haven't spoken since the hearing." Preston nodded understandingly. "Family rifts can be the hardest to mend, but in my experience, they're also the ones most worth healing for both parties." The news about Olivia lingered in William's thoughts as he drove back to the farm that evening. The divorce didn't surprise him given what had been revealed about Matthew in court, but her apparent career pivot suggested a deeper reevaluation. Was she truly reconsidering her priorities or merely responding pragmatically to changed circumstances? William arrived home to find an unfamiliar car parked in his driveway, a modest sedan rather than the luxury vehicle Olivia normally drove. His pulse quickened as he pulled up beside it, recognizing his daughter sitting on the porch steps, her posture conveying exhaustion and uncertainty. Olivia looked different, her designer clothes replaced by simple jeans and a sweater, her hair pulled back in a casual ponytail rather than the polished style she had maintained since college. The overall effect was to make her look younger, more vulnerable, more like the daughter he remembered before Matthew's influence had reshaped her priorities and persona. William approached slowly, giving her time to collect herself. "Hello, Olivia." She stood, her hands twisting nervously. "Bah, I know I'm probably the last person you want to see right now. I wouldn't blame you if you asked me to leave. But I needed to talk to you to try to explain, though I'm not sure there is any explanation that could possibly be adequate." William gestured toward the porch chairs. "It's getting chilly. Come inside." The kitchen's warmth enveloped them as William made tea, a ritual that had once been their special time together when Olivia was growing up. Marie had introduced the tradition, incorporating elements of her Vietnamese heritage into their American household. The familiar movements, heating the water, warming the pot, measuring the leaves, created a space where difficult conversations could unfold with less confrontation. Olivia looked around the kitchen, taking in details she had previously dismissed or criticized. The handmade pottery, the herbs drying in bunches from the ceiling, beams, the well-used but meticulously maintained cookware. "It's lovely here," she said softly. "I never really saw it before. I was too busy judging it against some arbitrary standard of what I thought success looked like." William placed a steaming mug before her, the fragrant jasmine tea releasing memories of countless previous conversations over similar cups. "What changed, Olivia?" She wrapped her hands around the mug, drawing comfort from its warmth. "Everything. After the hearing, I couldn't process what had happened. I felt shattered. Not just because we lost the case, but because everything I thought I knew had been turned upside down. My father wasn't the confused old man I'd convinced myself he was, but the brilliant attorney everyone else still remembered. And my husband wasn't the financial genius he claimed to be, but a cheat and a liar." Her voice cracked with emotion. "I went home that night and confronted Matthew about the affairs, about the financial losses. He didn't even try to deny it. He just laughed and said I was a fool for not seeing it sooner. Then he told me that my trust fund was gone. He'd used it to cover his margin calls months ago." William fought down the surge of anger this confirmation provoked. Now was not the time for righteous indignation, but for listening. "I left that night," Olivia continued, "packed one suitcase and checked into a hotel, filed for divorce the next morning. But that was just the beginning. I had to figure out who I was without Matthew, without the lifestyle we'd built. And I kept coming back to one question: how had I become someone who would try to destroy her own father for money?" She looked up, tears streaming down her face. "I've been staying with a law school friend, working through everything that happened. And then last week I was cleaning out some old boxes I'd stored in her garage, and I found Mom's diaries." William's breath caught. Marie had kept journals for years, recording her thoughts and observations about family life, about the world around her. After her death, William had been too raw with grief to read them. He had packed them away, assuming they had been lost in the move. "I didn't even know I had them," Olivia said, as if reading his thoughts. "They must have been mixed in with my things during the move after Mom died. I started reading them and she wrote about you with such love, such admiration. Over and over, she talked about how proud she was to be married to a man of principle, how she would rather have less money with a man of honor than all the wealth in the world with someone corrupt." Olivia's shoulders shook with silent sobs. "I completely misinterpreted everything. I took her occasional worry about money as resentment toward you, when really she was just trying to make sure we had enough. But she never doubted you. She never wanted you to be different." The revelation washed over William like a cleansing rain, dissolving layers of doubt he hadn't even realized he still carried. In his darkest moments after Marie's death, he had wondered if he had failed her somehow, if his commitment to public interest law and modest lifestyle had deprived her of comforts she deserved. "Your mother was an extraordinary woman," William said quietly. "She understood what truly mattered long before I did." Olivia nodded, wiping away tears. "She wrote about how you taught her to see beyond material success to measure life by different standards. And here I was doing exactly the opposite, judging you for choosing simplicity and purpose over status and wealth." She reached across the table, a tentative gesture seeking connection. "Bah, I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't expect things to go back to how they were. But I would like to try to get to know you again. The real you, not the version of you I created to justify my own choices." William looked at his daughter's outstretched hand, the same hand that had once clasped his tightly on first day of school walks, that had waved excitedly from graduation stages, that had rested trustingly in his as he escorted her down the aisle. Despite everything, she was still his child, still carried within her the potential to reclaim the values that had once guided her life. "It won't be easy," he said honestly. "Trust once broken isn't quickly repaired. But I would like that too, to rediscover who you are now and who you might become." Relief flooded Olivia's face. Could I, could I come visit sometimes, maybe help with the garden or something practical like that? "I would like that very much," William replied and meant it. As they finished their tea, an unexpected lightness settled between them. Not the easy comfort of their relationship before the rift, but something new and fragile, a beginning rather than a restoration. Olivia asked about the Benjamin Reynolds Center, listening attentively as William outlined his vision. For the first time, she seemed genuinely interested in understanding his choices rather than judging them against her own metrics of success. "It sounds wonderful," she said when he had finished. "Uncle Benjamin would be proud." "I hope so," William responded. He always believed in creating tangible good in the world, not just accumulating wealth for its own sake. Olivia hesitated, then asked, "Would there be any way I could help? I know I have no right to ask, and I would understand completely if you said no. But if there's anything, even something small..." William considered the request carefully. Was she truly interested in the project or simply seeking a path to redemption? And even if her motives were mixed, wasn't that true for most human actions? "The center will need attorneys willing to take cases pro bono or for reduced fees," he said finally. "Your corporate law background would actually be valuable for clients dealing with predatory lending or complex financial products." Hope flickered in Olivia's eyes. "I would need to learn a lot, reorient my practice. But I want to try Ba. I want to do something that matters." As Olivia prepared to leave, the evening shadows lengthening across the yard, she embraced William, a long, heartfelt hug that reminded him of when she was a child. The embrace conveyed both apology and gratitude, a wordless acknowledgement of harm done and the hope for healing. Standing on the porch, watching her car disappear down the rural road, William felt cautiously optimistic. The path ahead would not be smooth, but at least they were both walking in the same direction, now guided by values that transcended material success or social status. The next morning, William called Sarah with a new request. "I need to update my will and establish a foundation for the Benjamin Reynolds Center. Can you find us the right attorney for that?" Sarah's smile was audible through the phone. "I think I know just the person. Someone with estate planning expertise who's been looking for a way to use their skills for a larger purpose. Someone who might benefit from your mentorship as much as you benefit from their technical knowledge." "Who did you have in mind?" "A young attorney named James Mitchell. He's Preston Wallace's nephew, just starting his career, but already showing promise. And William, he's half Vietnamese on his mother's side. Marie would have liked that connection." The synchronicity of the suggestion struck William as fitting a symbolic bridge between his past and future, between the family he had lost and the legacy he was creating. "Set it up," he agreed. "Let's start building something that will outlast all of us." Spring blossomed across Atlanta, painting Benjamin's property in vibrant hues of renewal. 6 months of intensive work had transformed the main house into the headquarters of the Benjamin Reynolds Center for Housing Justice. The once private study now served as a reception area where clients were welcomed with dignity. The formal dining room had become a conference space for consultations. Benjamin's beloved garden flourished with additional benches where visitors could find moments of tranquility amid housing crises. William stood on the front porch watching volunteers unload supplies for the grand opening scheduled for the following day. The center embodied everything he and Benjamin had valued: practical assistance paired with recognition of human worth. It would provide legal aid to those facing eviction or foreclosure, housing counseling for first-time homebuyers, and advocacy for fair housing policies. More than a service provider, it would be a community hub where people found not just help, but hope. Sarah emerged from the main building, clipboard in hand, checking off final preparations. Her organizational skills had proven invaluable during the whirlwind of establishing the center's legal structure, securing nonprofit status, and coordinating the renovations. The banner just arrived, Preston sending 2 associates to help with setup, and Judge Parker confirmed he'll speak at the ceremony. William nodded appreciatively. The support from his former colleagues had exceeded expectations. Preston's firm had provided significant funding while other attorneys volunteered time and expertise. Most surprisingly, 3 retired judges had offered to serve on the center's advisory board, lending credibility and connections to the fledgling organization. "Any word from Olivia?" Sarah asked, her tone deliberately casual. "She's coming early to help with final arrangements." William tried to keep his voice neutral, but couldn't suppress a note of paternal pride. Over the past months, Olivia had undergone a transformation more substantive than cosmetic. The divorce from Matthew had been finalized, leaving her with little financially but a renewed sense of purpose. Their relationship remained fragile, marked by moments of connection, interspersed with uncomfortable silences. Trust rebuilt slowly, each small promise kept adding another thread to the damaged fabric of their bond. Olivia had maintained her word about visiting the farm, showing up every other weekend to help with gardening, cooking, or simple companionship. Initially awkward, these visits gradually developed their own rhythm, creating space for authentic conversation without the pressure of immediate reconciliation. Sarah squeezed William's shoulder gently. "She's trying, William. That counts for something." "It counts for everything," he acknowledged. "The effort means more than perfect results." As if summoned by their conversation, Olivia's modest sedan appeared on the driveway, kicking up small clouds of dust as it approached. She parked alongside the volunteers' vehicles and emerged carrying a box of what appeared to be freshly printed brochures. Her business attire had been replaced by casual clothing suitable for setup work, another small but significant shift from the status-conscious woman she had been. Olivia joined them on the porch, slightly breathless from carrying the heavy box. "The printer finished the materials early. I thought I'd bring them directly instead of waiting for delivery." She hesitated, then added, "I also took the liberty of creating some additional handouts about tenants' rights. With the recent changes to state law, I thought they might be useful for clients." William accepted the materials, touched by this tangible evidence of her commitment. "Thank you. This is exactly what the center needs: practical tools people can use to understand their rights." They worked together throughout the afternoon, transforming the property into a space ready for public celebration. Olivia moved with increasing confidence, offering suggestions that reflected genuine engagement with the center's mission. When volunteers from local community organizations arrived to assist, she welcomed them warmly without a trace of the condescension that might have characterized her interactions in the past. As evening approached, William found himself alone with Olivia in Benjamin's former kitchen, now converted into a break room for staff and volunteers. She was arranging refreshments for the next day's event, her movements efficient but unhurried. "You seem at home here," William observed. Olivia paused, considering the observation. "It's strange. I never visited Uncle Benjamin much when he was alive. I was always too busy with work or social obligations that seemed so important then. But being here these past months, I feel connected to him in a way I never did before. Like I'm finally understanding what he valued." William nodded, remembering how Benjamin had always seen potential in people that they couldn't yet recognize in themselves. "He would have been pleased to see you involved in this project. He always said you had a good heart beneath all that ambition." Did he? Surprise and gratification mingled in her voice. "I wish I'd known him better. I wish a lot of things had been different." She arranged the last platter with methodical care. "But there's something I need to tell you." William waited, giving her space to find her words. "I've been offered a position with the Housing Authority's legal team. It's not corporate law. The salary is about a third of what I used to make, but the work focuses on policy development and enforcement of fair housing regulations." Pride surged through William's chest. This wasn't just a career move, it represented a fundamental realignment of values. "That's excellent news. They'd be fortunate to have someone with your skills." "I haven't accepted yet," Olivia admitted. "I wanted to ask what you thought first. If you believe I'm ready for that kind of responsibility, after everything that happened." The question revealed vulnerability rarely displayed by his daughter, a willingness to be guided that touched William deeply. "The fact that you're asking that question suggests you are. People who never question their motives or abilities are the ones who should." Relief softened her features. "I'll call him tomorrow after the opening." She glanced around the transformed space. "It's remarkable what you've accomplished here in such a short time. From idea to reality in just 6 months. "We've accomplished," William corrected gently, "everyone who contributed something, whether funding or volunteer hours or simply believing in the possibility. That's how lasting change happens, not through single heroic acts, but through sustained collective effort." The wisdom seemed to resonate with Olivia in a way it might not have before her own life upheaval. "I'm starting to understand that." The hard way perhaps, but sometimes that's the only way lessons truly stick. They continued working in companionable silence until Sarah returned with last-minute updates, bringing a sense of imminent culmination to months of preparation. Tomorrow would mark not just the opening of a community resource, but the public emergence of William's vision for his brother's legacy. Morning arrived with perfect clarity, the sky a bottomless blue that Benjamin would have appreciated. By 9 o'clock, the property buzzed with activity as staff and volunteers made final preparations. William walked the grounds checking details and thanking contributors, his farmer's clothing replaced by a simple but dignified suit that bridged his past and present identities. The first guests began arriving at 10 community members, legal professionals, local officials, and media representatives. William greeted them at the entrance, introducing them to the center's mission and physical space. The reactions validated all the careful planning. Visitors responded not just to the practical services offered, but to the atmosphere of respect and dignity infusing every aspect of the environment. Judge Parker arrived early, his judicial demeanor softened by genuine enthusiasm for the project. This exceeds all expectations, William. You've created something truly special here. William guided him through the main building, pointing out how each space had been designed with client comfort and confidentiality in mind. The goal was to create an environment where people feel valued from the moment they enter, regardless of their circumstances. The judge nodded appreciatively. That perspective is sadly lacking in most legal settings. Courts, government offices, even private law firms, the architecture and procedures often intimidate rather than welcome those who most need assistance. That was Benjamin's gift, William reflected. He understood that physical spaces shape human experiences. How we treat people's bodies influences how they feel about themselves. He designed this property to nurture dignity. By 11, the front lawn filled with attendees spanning Atlanta's diverse communities. William recognized faces from his previous legal career, alongside new allies from neighborhood associations and advocacy groups. Mrs. Chen and Mrs. Sullivan, the elderly tenants from the rental cottages, sat in places of honor in the front row. They had become unofficial ambassadors for the center, their continued presence on the property embodying its commitment to housing stability across generations. Sarah orchestrated the opening ceremony with practiced efficiency, guiding speakers through the program while managing technical details behind the scenes. Olivia worked alongside her, handling guest questions and ensuring everyone found appropriate seating. Their collaborative efforts created a seamless experience that allowed William to focus on the substantive conversations that would build the center's network of support. At precisely noon, Sarah directed everyone to their seats. William took his place at the podium beneath a banner proclaiming Benjamin Reynolds Center for Housing Justice in dignified lettering. Looking out at the gathered crowd, nearly 200 people united by commitment to fair housing, he felt a profound sense of rightness of purpose fulfilled. Welcome, friends and neighbors, William began, his voice carrying clearly across the attentive audience. We gathered today not just to open a building, but to continue a conversation about what home means in our community, about who deserves the security of stable housing, about how we protect that fundamental human need against market forces that treat shelter as merely a commodity. He spoke without notes, drawing on decades of courtroom experience to connect with diverse listeners. My brother Benjamin understood something essential about property. He recognized that land and buildings aren't just financial assets, but vessels for human dignity and community belonging. The house you inhabit shapes your sense of possibility. The neighborhood you call home influences your access to opportunity. The stability of your housing situation determines whether you can plan for the future or merely survive each day. William gestured toward the main building behind him. This center exists because Benjamin believed everyone deserves that stability, that dignity, that belonging. He left this property to me with the simple instruction to do something that would make us both proud. Today marks the beginning of fulfilling that charge. He introduced Judge Parker, whose remarks tied the center's mission to broader principles of justice and community responsibility. Other speakers followed, a formerly homeless veteran who now helped others navigate housing programs, a senior advocate addressing the particular challenges faced by aging residents, a public interest attorney highlighting successful models from other communities. Throughout the ceremony, William found his gaze repeatedly drawn to Olivia. She sat in the third row, her attention fully engaged with each speaker, occasionally making notes in a small notebook. Gone was the distracted impatience that had characterized her attendance at similar events in the past, replaced by genuine investment in the substance being discussed. The formal program concluded with Preston Wallace announcing his firm's commitment to providing 20 hours of pro bono legal services weekly, a contribution worth tens of thousands of dollars annually. The crowd responded with enthusiastic applause, recognizing the significant impact such professional support would have for vulnerable clients. As guests dispersed to tour the facilities and enjoy the provided refreshments, William found himself approached by a tall, distinguished man he didn't immediately recognize. Mr. Reynolds, Harold Greenfield, Meridian Partners. I believe you've received some correspondence from our acquisition team. William tensed slightly, recalling the aggressive purchase offers they had discovered in Benjamin's papers. I have, Mr. Greenfield. Though I'm surprised to see you here today, given the center represents a very different vision for this property than your company proposed. The developer smiled thinly. We believe in understanding community dynamics even when they temporarily impede progress. This area remains strategically important for our development plans. The offer to purchase stands. In fact, we're prepared to increase it substantially. $2 million for the entire parcel, as is. The figure momentarily stole William's breath. Such a sum would fund the center's operations for years, potentially in a different location. Yet something in Greenfield's calculating gaze triggered warning signals, honed through decades of legal negotiations. What's your interest in this specific property, Mr. Greenfield? Atlanta has no shortage of developable land. The developer's expression revealed nothing. This parcel completes an assemblage we've been working on for 3 years. We've acquired everything else in the 4-block radius. Your brother was particularly resistant to our previous approaches. Understanding dawned with crystal clarity. Benjamin hadn't just been holding on to beloved property. He'd been intentionally preventing whatever master plan Meridian envisioned for the neighborhood. His resistance had protected not just his own home, but the character of the entire community. Then I'll continue his tradition of resistance, William replied calmly. This property isn't for sale at any price. It has found its highest purpose already. Greenfield's affable demeanor hardened. That's unfortunate. Development is inevitable in growing cities, Mr. Reynolds. Fighting the future rarely ends well for individual holdouts. William met his gaze steadily. I'm not an individual holdout anymore, Mr. Greenfield. Look around you. Today we've assembled a coalition of legal experts, community advocates, and public officials, all invested in this center's mission. Whatever pressure you apply to other property owners won't work here. The developer assessed the gathering with newfound wariness, noting the judges, attorneys, and local officials in attendance. Perhaps we'll revisit this conversation when the initial enthusiasm has faded and the hard reality of nonprofit sustainability sets in. Few such ventures survive beyond their founders' direct involvement. Then we'll build sustainability into the foundation, William countered. This isn't a vanity project, Mr. Greenfield. It's a legacy that will outlast all of us. The developer departed with professional courtesy that barely masked his frustration. William watched him go, recognizing that Meridian Partners represented just one of many challenges the center would face in the years ahead. Market pressures, shifting political priorities, funding constraints, all would test the organization's resilience. Yet today's overwhelming community response suggested the center had tapped into a genuine need that would generate ongoing support. As the event continued, William found himself increasingly drawn to the garden at the rear of the property. Benjamin had always found solace among growing things, maintaining extensive vegetable beds and flowering shrubs that transformed the urban lot into a pocket of natural abundance. The center's renovation had preserved this green space as a contemplative area for clients and staff. William settled on a bench beneath an ancient oak tree, taking a moment to absorb the day's significance. From this vantage point, he could observe the entire property. The main building now humming with purposeful activity, the rental cottages where Mrs. Chen and Mrs. Sullivan maintained their secure tenancy, the gathering spaces where strangers became neighbors through shared conversation. Sarah found him there, taking the seat beside him, with the comfortable familiarity of their decades-long association. The Housing Authority director was looking for you. She wants to discuss a potential partnership for their first-time homebuyer program. William nodded, making a mental note to find her before departing. How does it look from your perspective? Are we achieving what we set out to do? Sarah surveyed the property with evaluative precision. The turnout exceeded expectations. The media coverage will help with ongoing fundraising. Most importantly, we've already scheduled 30 client consultations for next week. People need these services, William. They've needed them for years. William felt a deep satisfaction that transcended personal vindication or professional accomplishment. This venture represented something more fundamental, a realignment of values in concrete form, principles made tangible through daily acts of service. Meridian Partners approached me today, he mentioned, offered $2 million for the property. Sarah's eyebrows rose. That would fund operations for a very long time. In a different location with different meaning, William noted. Benjamin held this ground for a reason. I think he understood it wasn't just about the buildings, but about maintaining affordable space in a neighborhood facing intense development pressure. Speaking of development pressure, Sarah nodded toward the main building where Olivia had emerged onto the porch, scanning the grounds with purpose. Your daughter seems to be looking for you. William raised a hand, catching Olivia's attention. She made her way across the lawn, navigating between clusters of guests with polite acknowledgments. Her confident stride and direct eye contact reflected growing comfort with her evolving identity. But the housing authority director is hoping to speak with you before she leaves, Olivia reported, confirming Sarah's earlier message. And Judge Parker mentioned wanting to discuss a potential diversion program for first-time housing code violators. Thank you, William acknowledged. I'll find them shortly. He patted the bench beside him. Join us for a moment first. I'd value your impressions of how things are going. Olivia settled beside them, her professional assessment complementing Sarah's operational perspective. People seemed genuinely engaged, not just making obligatory appearances. The conversations I've overheard are substantive, discussing specific housing challenges and potential solutions, not just exchanging pleasantries. Her observation demonstrated growing discernment about community dynamics. And 3 different attorneys approached me about volunteering regular hours. She added, they're from corporate backgrounds like mine, but looking for meaningful pro bono opportunities. That suggests sustainable support beyond today's event. William nodded appreciatively. What about you? How does it feel to be part of this launch? Olivia considered the question with characteristic thoroughness. Strangely familiar, as if I'm recovering something I'd forgotten, rather than discovering something entirely new. Growing up, I absorbed your and Mom's values without fully understanding them. Then I lost my way, seduced by Matthew's version of success. She looked across the thriving garden. Being here feels like returning to an authentic self I abandoned. The vulnerability in her admission touched William deeply. Your mother would be proud of who you're becoming, he said quietly. She always believed in the journey, not just the destination. Olivia's eyes glistened. I accepted the housing authority position this morning. I start next month. The announcement represented more than career news. It signified commitment to a path aligned with deeper values. William reached for her hand, squeezing it gently in wordless affirmation. Sarah excused herself tactfully, leaving father and daughter in a rare moment of unguarded connection. I spoke with Matthew yesterday, Olivia revealed after a thoughtful silence. He called to tell me he's moving to Chicago. Apparently, his investment failures were even more extensive than we knew. He's taking a junior position with a former colleague, starting over professionally. William absorbed this information, searching for the appropriate response. How do you feel about that? Relieved mostly, she admitted. His presence in Atlanta was a constant reminder of everything I'm trying to move beyond, but also sad. For the future I thought we'd have. For the person I believed he was. She straightened her shoulders, physically embodying her determination to move forward. But that's in the past now. Today is about new beginnings. They returned to the gathering together, William reconnecting with the housing authority director, while Olivia guided the final visitors through the center's resources. The afternoon progressed with continuous, meaningful interactions, each conversation weaving another strand in the community network that would sustain the center's work. As evening approached and the crowd thinned, those most intimately involved with the project gathered on the front porch. Judge Parker and Preston Wallace engaged in animated discussion about potential legal reforms. Sarah coordinated with the newly hired administrative director, ensuring smooth transition to regular operations. The youngest volunteers tackled cleanup with energetic efficiency. William stood at the porch railing, watching this diverse group united by shared purpose. The center had transformed from abstract vision to living reality, populated by individuals committed to extending its impact beyond this inaugural day. When only the core team remained, William raised a glass in simple toast. To Benjamin, whose generosity made this possible. To all of you whose efforts transform possibility into reality. And to those we'll serve in the years ahead, whose lives will improve through the work done here. They drank the toast with quiet solemnity, recognizing both accomplishment and responsibility. One by one, the contributors departed until only William, Sarah, and Olivia remained contemplating the property in the gathering twilight. "I should get back to the farm," William said finally. "The chickens won't understand why their evening feeding is delayed no matter how good the reason." Sarah chuckled at the reminder of his ongoing rural responsibilities. "I'll finish securing everything here. The security system is active and the first staff members arrive at 8 tomorrow to prepare for client appointments." Olivia hesitated, then offered, "I could come out to the farm this weekend, help with the garden or whatever needs doing." "I'd like that," William confirmed. Their weekend collaborations had become meaningful rituals, creating space for gradual reconciliation through shared labor and purpose. As William drove back to his farmhouse that evening, he reflected on the day's significance. The center's opening represented not just fulfillment of obligation to Benjamin's memory, but manifestation of values that had guided his own life. Justice made accessible, dignity, preserved community, strengthened through mutual support. His thoughts turned to Olivia's transformation, perhaps the most meaningful outcome of recent months. She had confronted painful truths about herself and her choices, begun the hard work of reclaiming authentic purpose, found courage to build a life aligned with deeper values. Her journey remained unfinished, their relationship still healing, yet the trajectory inspired profound hope. The farmhouse welcomed him with familiar comfort as darkness settled across the countryside. William tended to his evening chores, feeding chickens, watering seedlings, checking perimeters with practiced efficiency. These simple routines grounded him after the emotional intensity of the day's public events. Later settled in his favorite chair with a cup of tea, William opened Marie's diary to the passage Olivia had mentioned during their reconciliation. His wife's handwriting flowed across the page with characteristic grace, recording her reflections from 20 years earlier. "William came home discouraged today after losing the Jensen case. The system favored wealth and connections over clear legal principles, as it so often does. Yet watching him process this defeat reminds me why I fell in love with him. He doesn't surrender to cynicism or compromise his standards for easier victories. He recommits to the longer struggle, finding new approaches to advance justice within imperfect systems. This integrity is worth more than any material success could ever be. I would rather navigate life's challenges alongside a man of principle than enjoy luxury with someone who has abandoned their moral compass." The words bridged time and loss, Marie's voice reaching across years to affirm choices made and values maintained. William touched the page gently, gratitude mingling with lingering grief. Their shared life had ended prematurely, yet her influence continued through legacies both personal and public, in Olivia's renewed commitment to meaningful work in the center's mission of accessible justice, in his own ongoing journey of purpose beyond professional identity. As darkness deepened outside his windows, William stepped onto the porch with a final cup of tea. Stars emerged against the velvet sky, the same stars Benjamin had taught him to identify during childhood evenings on their family's modest farm. The constellations offered perspective, human lives brief against cosmic time frames, yet capable of creating meaning through conscious choice and committed action. William raised his cup toward the brightest star, a silent toast to his brother. "We did it, Benjamin. We created something that will outlast us both." The night accepted his words, enfolding them in peaceful silence. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, clients needing assistance, systems requiring reform, relationships continuing to evolve. The center would face funding pressures, political headwinds, and the inevitable limitations of addressing structural problems through individual interventions. His relationship with Olivia would encounter further complications and setbacks along the path to genuine restoration. Yet tonight, William embraced simple gratitude for meaningful work accomplished and connections renewed. Benjamin's legacy had become not just preserved property, but living purpose, touching lives far beyond their immediate family. His own journey had evolved from grief and withdrawal to renewed engagement, proving that purpose remained available at every life stage for those willing to respond to deeper callings. The farmhouse stood solid behind him. The center thrived in Atlanta before him, and between these physical anchors stretched a life recommitted to creating tangible good in a complex world. Not perfect justice, no single effort could achieve that, but practical progress advancing dignity and security for vulnerable neighbors. As crickets sang their evening chorus from surrounding fields, William absorbed the peaceful certainty of having honored his brother's trust while reclaiming his own authentic path. Justice is not a privilege, he murmured to the listening night. It is a right. The words echoed Benjamin's lifelong conviction, now enshrined in the center, bearing his name. William returned inside, preparing for well-earned rest. Tomorrow's challenges would arrive soon enough. Tonight belonged to quiet acknowledgement of how far the journey had already come, from betrayal to restoration, from loss to renewed purpose, from individual grief to community commitment. The path ahead remained uncharted, yet he would walk it with the confidence of one who had rediscovered essential truths about what made life meaningful. In the distance, an owl called Benjamin's favorite evening sound. William smiled at the coincidence, or perhaps the connection, accepting it as gentle confirmation of rightness in all that had unfolded. One journey completed another beginning, the continuous cycle of purpose, discovered, fulfilled, and renewed across generations.